Hello, and welcome everyone to what is our fifth video, actually a bonus video in the series that we're calling St. John the Divine's Financial Situation, Serious but Not Fatal. And just a reminder, we're doing this series of videos to introduce all members of the congregation to our financial systems, to provide information about our current financial situation, and to ensure that everyone feels confident participating in discussions about future plans. At this point, we have completed 4 shorter videos. Video 1 focused on our current financial situation, video 2 discussing current St. John the Divine expenses, video 3 focused on sources of income, and video 4 on the budgeting process and the AGM. Those 4 videos really ought to be more than sufficient for anyone who's just looking for a basic, thorough, detailed, but solid, but still, basic essentials kind of introduction. This is the bonus video, and this is the video where you're going to be introduced to our budgeting system and how our budgeting system currently works. This is a deeper dive for people who want more detailed information. I am joined once again with our fearless treasurer, David Buckman, for a bonus video that we're calling, What Are the Details of Our Current Financial System? We can think of this as a video in which we are looking under the hood of our financial system, really getting down into the nitty-gritty details. So just to get us started, how would you describe our current financial system?
I believe that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So what I want to do, if you may allow me, is to actually put up a picture or a chart of what our financial system is. This is what our overall financial system looks like. It's where basically shows where our money comes in and money goes out. It obviously is somewhat complicated. So what I'm going to do is just to look at it, a bit at a time, because it's easier if we talk about just part of it at the same time. So this is the top of the chart, and it talks basically about money coming into the parish and down as far as our bank account. The collection plate is traditionally where money comes into the church. Particularly in the last couple of years with few services and so on, that is not now quite as important, but it still is counted once a month, because that's where a significant proportion of our revenue comes in. Most of our revenue comes in, though, in administrative deposit, which is the next box. That includes all cash and checks and other stuff arriving in the office. So it is also just counted, in fact, and deposited once a month, but it includes all sorts of different things, from rentals, collections, outreach, gifts, etc., etc. So the third one is direct deposit, which actually covers a few different things. It's monthly givings that people give direct from their bank account or from their credit card. And the last one is from Canada Helps, which we've used more frequently during COVID, but that money or cash is forwarded to us weekly, every Friday, with full data as to who has donated it. Each of these streams, as you can see underneath, is actually has a module, or an Excel box. Means that the data from each of these sources is put into an Excel program, and the data then is put into these sort of green boxes here, which will show up all over this chart, but they're called SP.
Okay. What is SP?
Sorry, that's jargon. SP is SharePoint, which is a database accessible only to St. John the Divine people. It shows up all over the place on this chart. It allows flexibility in processing, because It's just a database where you store information until you're ready to use it again.
Okay.
All participants in our finances are tied into this, including, for example, Joan Hazard, the finance chair, Nicholas, our bookkeeper, Carol Ann, of course, in the office, and GI, which is short for Givings, which is Jim Harley. One branch of this, of SP, is actually for donation data, which is restricted actually to Jim, Carol Ann, and myself, because that is obviously very confidential information, and so is not accessible to others who may have access to other parts of it. And that's an important feature, in fact, of SP. So back to the flowchart, if I may. The centerpiece, as you can see, of this is actually our 2 new Coast Capital Savings Federal Credit Union bank accounts, the checking and the savings accounts.
Okay.
In March 2022, there's a bit of recent history here, the diocese suddenly told us that link banking was no more. Now, link banking was where all the 45 parishes in the diocese shared a bank account. Some were overdrawn, some had funds. As long as the diocese collectively had money, TD Bank was happy. A parish, an individual parish had funds, they earned a little bit of interest on that. And if a parish was overdrawn, then they paid a little bit more of interest on that. Now, the diocese kindly said we could stay with TD if we wanted, but that would have cost us at least $360 a year, as they offered many different plans, and we started looking at it. But finance team decided we would look around at other banking options. I personally had good experience with 2 other nonprofits at Coast Capital, and so we decided to go with them. Also because we felt that the mission, if you like, of a credit union is more aligned with our mission as an Anglican parish than a big 5 bank might be. So now we have the flexibility, in fact, to keep our operating funds in the checking account, and we also are free given a second account, a savings account, which in fact is used just for our project funds, and we'll talk more about that later. We can freely transfer funds between those accounts. Also, Coast Capital is geared to a non-profit 2 signature requirements. We can't send money anywhere without 2 signatures, separate signatures. Also, for example, we get access to Interact Transfer, which is not available in TD Bank or any of the big 5. So on Easter Monday this year, in April 2022, we closed our old TD account, and we're not too upset or worried about that because it was quite an interesting process.
Well, it sounds like, based on what you've said, that it was the right decision to switch over. Was it an easy process?
Definitely not. It was a very harrowing process and took about a couple of months, basically. First of all, there are 22, or were 22 separate pre-authorized credits or pre-authorized debits, which are vendors or creditors that automatically take money from or put money into our account. We had to change all of those and tell them, hey, don't put the money in that old account, you've got to put it in the new account. So, for example, all our utility bills, that's Hydro, Fortis, City, Shore, and so on, are all on pre-authorized credit, which means they can just draw money out of our account, and that's standard practice for a lot of people. They, of course, send us copies of bills as they do it. The diocese, in fact, is our main creditor and debitor, if you like, because first of all, they collect all the money that comes out of your bank account. It's called ECP, or electronic collection plate. So that is deposited in our account a couple of times a month, mid-month and end month. And conversely, they take out every month the payroll, of course, automatically, and twice a month. And they also take out once a month the $7,000 we pay for our assessment. So, as I said, there were 22 of these, and it took several weeks to make this change. For example, some of them, TD Merchant Services, are the prime example of this. I called them in Toronto to find out how to make this change. Nothing happened for a couple of weeks, so I called back later, and they said, we have no record of your call, start again. Anyway, when they finally made the change, they didn't bother to tell me, so I had to call back a third time and say, when are you going to make this change? They said, oh, we did it a week ago. So, I mean, it was not easy sometimes making the changes depending on how the vendor or the creditor would handle these things. Anyway, the job is now complete, and I hope it will stay that way. I think it will for a long change. Going back to TDMS for a moment, when we made that change, TD Bank said to us, we're going to charge you an extra $10 a month to put the money not in a TD account, but in another bank or another place. Well, we had to swallow that for the moment. The back of our minds said, well, think about that in the future. And when they sent us a notice in August that they were going to raise our rates in November, we said, the time has come to change, and we're now trying to go through that change. Anyway, our experience has been very positive in the last 6 months with, in fact, our new bank.
That's good to know. Okay. So then what's below? Okay. Wow. Okay. Whole nother level. So first thing I see here says Telpay. What exactly is Telpay?
Good question. This has been, in fact, a major change brought about by COVID in our financial system. Back in 2019 or early 2020, we created, printed, signed, and mailed 25 to 30 checks a month. That was the way we paid our bills, by and large. However, in COVID, the office shut, and we were very reluctant to pass checks around and all that sort of thing. And in fact, our bookkeeper introduced us to Telpay, which is a Canadian company based in Winnipeg. I had some experience with them with one of my earlier nonprofits that deposited money into our account. So I went to them and checked their system, and it still requires 2 approvals. But these are now done electronically, and it literally totally replaces a check. And so what you're saving is the cost of a printed check, the physical check, which can be anything from a quarter to 50 cents per, depending on how many you get printed at one time. No cost of mailing it, which is $1 a check if you mail it. There's no having to bring checks from our bookkeeper to our office and then getting people in to sign it, etc. And the main thing is it's easier to track. With just one bank withdrawal every time you use it, instead of 12 to 15 checks that you are going to come in at random times afterwards, depending on when people cash them. Now it costs us $15 a month plus 50 cents, originally now 60 cents per bill paid. But this has been more than offset by the costs that I mentioned earlier, and also, of course, the bookkeeper's time and cost, because he can do all of this now in his office. He does not have to come to the church office, and nor do the other people. For example, all the music scholars and the food bank volunteers now are paid electronically using Telpay. So in 2022 to date, we have printed, signed, and sent out only 42 checks, so that's about 5 a month. And in particular, since May, we've only sent out 16, which is only about 3 per month. So this has become, like, if you like, a very 20th century way of doing business. Most of our payments are now electronic by Telpay.
Okay, so what I see is that, that box that says Telpay points down to a box that says money leaving the parish. And when we say money leaving the parish, it really is about paying bills. It's about paying for things. So do we use all 3 methods pointing into money leaving the parish to pay our bills?
Absolutely. And I mentioned all 3 before. Most of it in terms of numbers of transactions goes by Telpay, and PACs or pre-authorized credit charges, that I mentioned before, our hydro bills, for example, or utility bills. We also pay a few software and telephone bills by credit card, but that's something that may not last much longer, because you may have noticed that there are new rules about surcharges being payable if you use a credit card to pay a bill. This is now legally I believe, in Canada, but it will not start for a month or 2 yet. So I think this change in the way, this will change the way we use credit cards, and we'll probably put them onto Telpay as well. But this change in the way we paid our bills is, in fact, one of the largest since I came to St. John de Divine just over 3 years ago. At the bottom of this chart, we see how we handle and report our data. First of all, our bookkeeper uses the Sage system here, which is our accounting database, which in fact I have personal access to, and so do 1 or 2 other people. But we can't change the system, of course, we just have access to it. So I produce actually monthly reports to the finance team, which are forwarded to the Parish Council afterwards. And we also compile quarterly reports to the parish, which are published in Divine Connections, and of course the annual report that goes to the AGM. Last but not least, on the right-hand side here, we have your tax receipts. Jim Harlick, who is our envelope secretary, uses a new Canadian system, actually, likewise called donation in capitals, which replaces Power Church, which is the one we used to use to print out or keep track of and print out everyone's tax receipts at year end.
Now I see that there's lots of ways that we manage money and use funds and move money around. And given that there's so many ways of doing these things, that helps me to get a better sense of why the financial reports we get as members of the parish council and as members of the congregation and at the annual general meeting are so complicated. Just rows and rows of charts and numbers and columns. So what can you tell me about these reports? Frankly, I'm kind of hoping you'll give me a quick overview of how to read these reports so that I can feel a little more confident looking at them and making sure I understand what you're showing me.
Sure, so let's look at some recent examples of these regular reports. And of course, the most regular one is the monthly report to finance team, which is then sent on to Parish Council. Okay, this one-page report summarizes all the data in videos 1 to 4, which you presumably have watched, so you'll be able to relate to that. Let's focus in on different sections of the report one at a time. First of all, let's talk about what I call on this report our core operating income, revenue, and deficit. I use the word core actually merely because it's shorter instead of the word operating that we used in the first 4 videos. Okay, but it means the same thing. So each department in and out, that's givings, rentals, and clergy worship and so on, all of those are monitored separately and includes each of the columns. For example, you have how much they've actually spent. This column here, this is what the budget for the first 8 months ending 31st of August is, and that simply gives the percentage of budget. And as you can see, as I said when I sent this out, I mean, we're tracking our budget pretty closely. The only, of course, exception is fundraising, which essentially we had a 0 budget, so we happened to have a bit of fundraising that was in. And so that brings us down to the net core or operating deficit line, which, as you can see, is within 2%, which after 8 months of the year is not bad. Let's move down a little bit and look at some other revenues expenses. If you look at these 4 lines here are ones we talked about in video 2, I think. First of all, memorials and bequests. That, as you recall, is only if sadly a parishioner dies, then they leave us some money. Obviously, we've had nothing to date in 2022, so that's 0. And of course, our budget is always 0 for that. Federal government wage subsidy likewise is 0 because that ended last year, and we could in fact now delete that line. And of course, the budget was 0 for that anyway. Net investment income, you may remember we talked about that. Investment income comes in 2 parts. This here is the regular dividends and interest part. It's not realized gains, which we only deal with at year end. On the monthly basis, we don't worry about realized gains. But this is the net investment income. As you can see, we're doing actually somewhat better than budget, and we've got about 16,000 actual income come in. This last line here involves all projects, and I'll go to detail in a moment, but I just wanted to say this last highlighted line here is what I've called in previous slides a net cash flow, which is, if you like, the net after the original operating deficit, and now we've added these first 3 items and deleted the last item. So that gives you a net cash flow. And as you can see, we're doing very well because, in fact, projects, as we'll see in a moment, are way behind in 2022. And so our net cash flow is much less negative, only about half as bad as it was expected or planned to be at this point in time. So let's look a little bit more into these projects. We only highlight, of course, the major projects. This organ console project, including rental organ cost, is now complete, was completed actually last month. This is what we actually spent versus the budget, but we also received some more pledges which offset that. And if I go back to this previous line, you will see that the cost is net of any pledges. So in other words, we only spent 2320, which is 9320 minus 7,000.
Mhm.
The lower hall access project is now an elevator project. Originally, we were going to have a ramp. We got this 100,000 grant, which in 2020, which basically stayed with us all last year because we couldn't do much because of COVID.
Mhm.
We planned to do it this year, and we actually planned to have it done by now. However, there are delays in getting permits with a project, so that's why we have spent barely anything of it. This last major project here is the lower hall flooring, where we
Mhm.
got an Anglican Foundation grant of, I think, $13,500, which we've included in pledges received. And we had planned to spend 3,000, but so far we've only spent $50. But that will in fact be completed by the end of this month, I believe, or certainly by next month. So, and then we have the smaller projects for which an annual allowance is made. The only small projects we've done essentially this year are the upgrade to the office floor,
Mhm.
which was very much needed, and that cost just about $3,600. And so there were other minor things there. That total projects to date is carried up to here. And remember, that's negative merely because we subtract the pledges received, 25,000 from the 21,000 spent. So this last little section at the bottom is what I call our working capital position, and essentially shows us how much money we've got in the bank. Because what it says is at the end of December, we had 172,000 of current assets, which is mostly money in the bank and what people owe us. That's now dropped by $35,000 to 137,000. The liabilities are what we owe other people, like outstanding bills. That was 42,000. It's now dropped to 24. So the net working capital, which is basically defined as your current assets minus your current liabilities, we have over 112,000, largely because we've got this 100,000 sitting in the bank.
Mhm.
So about $17,500 worse off than we were at the beginning of the month.
So that's the report. I've seen those as a parish council member, that this is the kind of monthly report that comes to a parish council meeting. So what happens at each month at parish council when this report gets discussed?
Part of parish council business as a regular motion, this report is received. It's not approved, of course, because they don't know whether the numbers are right or not, but it is received as my best estimate as to where we are and to get that read into the record, so to speak. I make a brief commentary on it in the email in which it's sent out to parish council members. Like, for example, I've been saying in recent months, we're tracking the budget pretty closely in our operating revenue and costs. There are very, very rarely any questions asked either before or during the meeting, which is kind of odd and a little disappointing. In fact, you were one of the first people who asked to sit down with me and look at it and ask some good questions.
Well, I can say that I feel that the kind of information that you have given me in conversations and that I hope we're making available to a lot of people through these videos is the kind of information that makes me feel more confident about being able to ask questions. So sometimes it's hard to know how to phrase a question or even what your question is and without a fuller understanding of what's going on. So I feel like you probably will get more questions in the future. And I also think that one of the things these videos are really going to show is that you really know your stuff and it's fun to listen to you explain things. So what other regular reports do you send out then?
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I mean, obviously, I and the finance team are pretty close to this, and we want to make sure that we get the information out in as coherent a way as possible so that people can ask questions. So a new feature in the last year or so has been that each quarter, finance sends out in Divine Connections, which, as you know, is our quarterly publication. We send out a similar report to this, plus some words explaining where we think we are and some commentary. This
Okay.
is from the summer 2022 edition. This is exactly how we send it out. We provide the data to Bill Huzar, who produces this wonderful Divine Connections. And you will see that this chart here is actually very similar. This is June, of course, not August, but it's in essence, it's exactly the same chart as we were just looking at. what we do here, and the Finance Committee sort of collectively writes this commentary, and we talk about, what's happening, universe is unfolding largely as expected, and make some comments about that.
Mhm.
But one comment, for example, we make is that our core deficit at 127,000 in June is still too high. That's just a general statement consistent with our earlier videos.
Mhm.
We talk about our project expenses, and then I've highlighted this paragraph here, where in fact, I'm explaining how it is in fact we managed, despite a core deficit of $127,000, to stay solvent. And the answer is we've had to withdraw a total at that point of $103,000 from our investment portfolio so far in 2022, which was 5.9% of our portfolio as it stood on the 31st of December, which of course has now dropped through market corrections also. Now, and furthermore, we plan to have to draw a further 96,500 by year end to help us stay solvent and pay our bills. And we go on to comment, of course, that this cannot be sustained, as was discussed at the annual meeting. And we're currently reviewing, and this is part of that exercise, how the 23 and later budgets can be more self-sustaining. A line-by-line budget review, in fact, has been done now, and we have already had a head start on 2023.
Mhm.
I also wanted to comment that we are, as we've said in earlier videos, working closely with the Transforming Futures and their initial plans for the next 5 to 10 years, which will be shared with the parish and is being shared right now. And of course, input from the stewardship team, which you're starting to see right now, their excellent work. Final comment there on the working capital button. At the bottom, it simply says, if you want more information, that's my phone number or that is my email.
And so you really mean it when you say that you want people to reach out to you and ask questions. Is this something people follow up on?
Sadly, no.
Mm.
I've had one member of the parish, other than yourself, who actually has asked questions over the phone, but I don't get any feedback essentially from the parish normally. I'm one or two people may have said something to me at church, for example, or something like that, but I don't get asked the hard questions.
Well, and I think though that one of the things that you've made clear in these videos over and over again is that you're ready for the hard questions and you really do want people to ask. So I hope that more and more people will take you up on that very, very generous invitation. That said, you're not keeping any of this information secret. How else do you report on our financial position?
Well, as you're obviously aware by now, we can't meet our payroll and other bills without taking from our investment portfolio each month.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have to be aware of, and you should be aware of, is how we track our bank accounts
Mm-hmm.
for solvency and deficit. This chart here is, we call it our cash flow model, because it is literally driven by our bank activities and it's closely tied into the ins and outs of our bank. Now, you can't see much of the detail there, so I'm just going to actually change it to look at just part of it at a time, so that we can focus on what exactly it is saying.
Mm-hmm.
This is the top part of the chart, and it's called our ongoing cash flow model, and it's our bank operating accounts, our 2022 plan as of the 3rd of October, which was the last time I actually updated it.
Mm-hmm.
The top part that you're seeing actually covers only our checking or operating account only. It rolls forward month by month, of course, and is accurate to the end of September, which was the last time we balanced our checking account. There are two broad sections in this: regular and irregular income. This regular income is at the top, and as you can see, it ends up with a regular deficit. But let's look at in detail at where these regular incomes and outgoes come and go. First of all, donations are pretty steady at this time, around $16,000 a month. And we can extrapolate or forecast future months rather, from recent months. Canada Helps, a little less than it was in the time of COVID, which is fine, but we still keep it open. It's around $2,000 a month.
Mhm.
Collections, as you can see, were actually zero in July, but that's not true because, of course, we did have collections. They were counted a little too late and they were added part of the August total.
Mm.
So see, those are, about, they were high as 4,000 in September, and we're hoping they're going to stay higher than 2,500 for the rest of the year.
Mhm.
Investments, we are having, we handle that now lower down separately. Admin deposit is an interesting one. That's, as I said before, all the other stuff that comes in via the office, and that's running fairly consistently around $15,000 a month, of which roughly half is the regular monthly check from Pacific for Victoria or POV for their long-term lease rent. So we get in about $35,000 to $40,000 per month regular credits. But of course, we've got regular outgo, and the biggest of those, of course, is our payroll and diocesan assessment, which come to about $37,000 a month on average. And that's what we're assuming for the next 3 months. PAP is pre-authorized payments, which I mentioned earlier. I call them PACs or pre-authorized charges, mostly utilities and things like that. They run at around $7,000 to $8,000 a month normally. And Telpay, we have 2 runs of that a month, and collectively they run usually $10,000 to $15,000, and we're assuming about $15,000 for the rest of the year. Checks, as you can see, are now a very minor part. In July, we had 3 checks cashed, I think, and a couple in August. We only had 1 check, I believe, cashed in September. We're being a little cautious and assume we're going to write a few more checks in the rest of the year, but collectively, we have regular payments that of the order of $60,000, which of course is much more than our 35 to 40.
Yeah.
So we get this net, as I call it, of regular items is a deficit, and that's why it's in red, of anything up to 27,000, and that average is out around 22,000 a month.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's sort of the regular ins and outs, which we've got to pay attention to. If we now look at the irregular items, which are the next section of this report, we have some irregular credits, and this is where the investment draws are actually tracked. And as you can see, those have been highlighted, and that's where the 22,500 a month is coming in. We get some other odd stuff coming in, like a $1,000 curacy grant came in July. We are going to get a $7,300, hopefully, Canada Assistance Plan grant this month to pay for Vanessa White's work with us as a Zoom assistant, technical assistant, as a summer student. Likewise, we have some irregular payments. One regular one actually is $1,646 every quarter. We pay for a copier lease.
Mhm.
In July, we had, as I mentioned earlier, the office renovations, $36.86 we spent. And we had a final payment for the organ refurbishment this past month of $26.25. Just mention briefly these 3 entries for Ukrainian refugees. We had a large donation earlier in the year, which is slowly being drawn down to help the people who are looking after our Ukrainian refugees. One other thing I quickly mentioned is this thing that's this cover draft, which is in and out. I mentioned that there is free transfer between the checking and savings accounts if we want to make transfers. Unfortunately, in August, the diocese ran the payroll a day earlier than we were expecting, and we hadn't yet put the admin deposit in. And so our checking account suddenly ended up that evening or that night at $11,105 in overdraft. We didn't know that until, unfortunately, the next day, which is already into September. And so we've had to pay it back in September. But that's why when you come to the actual balance at the end of the month, after that cover draft was done, when we put our admin deposit in, we actually had $15,000 in the bank. So, but this was still, we still owed the bank or the savings account that. So that's why that shows up. And I just wanted to explain that just literally in and out. So at the bottom, we have the closing balances for our banks. And of course, TD Bank since April has been 0. And that's our Coast Capital checking account balance. And As you can see, we're hoping that's going to remain positive. If it doesn't, we have the savings account to draw on, but we will talk about the savings account in a moment because that's essentially used for for our project management.
Well, I think that
Okay.
it's absolutely clear from all the things that you've walked through that everything here is absolutely transparent. All the records are kept, every penny is accounted for. And so, looking at these kinds of documents, every bit of information is available to every member of the congregation. So, what about the savings account, which, as if I'm understanding it right, you said, the savings account is really what we're using as the project management account.
Exactly. And what you can see on the screen is the checking account, which, as I said before, is reconciled back to our actual bank closing statements for the ones where you have the actual. And of course, the big thing to remember is that if this ever goes negative, Houston, we have a problem
Hmm.
where we can't pay our bills and, the bank would obviously be after us. So let's look down at the last section of this, which of course is the new project management approach. It's very simple in and out. We have revenue coming in from new grants received. We got 13,500 in July from the Anglican Foundation towards our new floor in the lower hall. We've had pledges from the congregation received since then. We've also got, of course, interest from the bank, and glad to see it's up to $100 now for what this $100,000 we're actually keeping in. So each month we're carrying forward, roughly $100,000, because in the first 3 months of this year, or sorry, the last 3 months, I should say, July, August, September, we have not actually spent anything on any of the projects.
Hmm.
So the total project expenses was zero. This was this cover draft that I mentioned earlier that came out and then went back in.
Hmm.
So the balance, if you like, as carried forward has sort of more or less stayed at a large amount of money, 112,000 at the end of September. Now, of course, as with the checking account, we have to forecast what's happening. Obviously, we can forecast um, interest received, which of course is dependent on our bank balance. That they obviously pay us money on that. And so we're not expecting at this point any more money in, but that could change as Parish Council and the finance team think about pledges and other things like that. But this is the actual expenditure we're expecting for the last 3 months. Now, we're not expecting any further expense, as I understand it, on the lower hall access, which is the elevator project, because of the delays in permitting, which I mentioned earlier. And so largely, most of that money will be carried over till next year. This money for the flooring, it's going to be about 22,000, 23,000, something like that. That is planned to be spent in October, November. And that includes some upgrades, which I think have not yet been finally approved. But obviously I have as treasurer to worry about, well, what are they actually going to spend rather than what's necessarily fully approved at this point. But again, the bottom line here is that we currently have over $100,000 in the bank as of the end of last year. We're spending some of that on the flooring project. By the end of the year, we'll have still over $90,000 left in our savings account, which hopefully will build our elevator and the new access to the lower hall.
So, how does all this relate back to what we discussed in videos 1 through 4?
That's a great question. As you said at the beginning, we're trying to show those people interested in this deeper dive what exactly happens under the hood. So let's just recap briefly what we saw in those videos and try and explain the links between the videos. First of all, we talked a lot in videos 1 and 3 about operating revenue, and the flow chart, of course, and the cash flow module, but both sort of showed you where that revenue comes in and how it gets linked into our bank account and to our accounting. Likewise, with operating costs, you've seen we have to pay our bills by till pay, by pre-authorized charge, or by check. And so that's where those go, including payroll, for example, which is pre-authorized charge to the diocese. And then the non-operating costs and revenue, a lot of that comes in and out through the savings account, because that is handling the project management, which is where you may recall from video 3, we talked a lot about the ins and outs of our project. So I guess the bottom line is that, as we saw in the earlier videos too, making changes will be difficult, but it is essential.
And while making changes will be difficult, I think deciding what changes to make and making those decisions in a consultative, thoughtful way requires really having a great understanding of the current financial system and the big financial picture. And I think that's really what you've offered in all of the videos and especially in this deep dive. So thank you so much. I
My
think you
pleasure.
really made it possible for people to ask good questions, come up with good plans, and I'm really thinking this could lead to some good things. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin, for asking the good and difficult questions. And my door is open. As I joke with people, that's why you pay me the big bucks. I'm always happy to to talk to people and answer any questions as thoroughly as I can. Thank you all.
Thank you.